Mode.
Good morning, everybody. Welcome along to today's What If webinar. We've got a big crowd today, which is good to see, and a range of people from all over the world, which is good too. It's just ticked over 8 a.m. in New Zealand here, so thank you to those in Aussie who have made the effort to come along. It's early morning for you, and those in the UK, I know it's sort of getting on in your evening, so thanks a lot for coming along. Online with us today, we've got Mr. Ian Bohr, who's a director and founder here at Queensberry, and he'll be presenting to us with the help of Stephen Bohr, who is the CEO here at Queensberry, and Mr. Gino Dima, who's our US account manager, and which I'm sure many of you will know. We've also got Danny and myself, Nigel, and we'll be sort of behind the scenes here, keeping these guys on track. So it's a sprightly team with you this morning, and yeah, we appreciate you coming along. You guys all still with us?
Yep, I'm here.
Yeah, good morning, Nigel. Good morning, Gino.
Yes, good morning, Nigel.
Sorry,
Cool.
good morning, Nigel.
All right, just a couple of quick things before we get going. You can chat in any questions you have during the webinar. So if you take a look at your GoToWebinar control panel, there's a little section there called questions, and it just works like any normal chat program. You can just chat your question in, that'll come through to us. We'll either pull the question out and ask the guys live if it's sort of applicable to the whole group. Otherwise, either Danny or myself or one of the team will get back to you via the chat. So feel free to get your questions in. There is a lot of you on the webinar today, so there may be a little bit of a delay as we just get through the questions, but we'll do our best to get back to you as soon as we can. Other than that, we are recording today's session, so if you do miss anything, it will be online on our Vimeo channel shortly after today's session, and I'm sure Ian and the guys will show you all about that towards the end. But that's just about it from me, guys. If you're ready to get going, we'll kick off, eh?
Yep, sounds good. What we're going to start off by doing is talking about our minimum average
I
sale
interrupt there for a second?
Yeah, sure.
A couple of people said they can't see your screen yet, so you might
Okay.
want to
Can you guys see it?
stop.
How's that?
Yeah, I can see it all right.
No way.
Yeah, I can see it as well, Ian.
Okay. So the point that we're going to start off the tool that we're going to use to sort of manage this conversation, and it will be a conversation about what happens in people's businesses, depending upon the things that you do to change it, if you like. Playing what if, in other words, is to use a spreadsheet calculator, which we've talked about in the last of the webinars that we did in this series. And the purpose of that is to say, given the amount that you want to earn, and you need to start off by saying that, how much do I want to earn out of my business? And the way that you do business now, how much do you need to earn from each client? Now, this is an interesting question because photographers always talk about the amount that they earn for particular jobs and so on. Sometimes we feel that there's an element of boasting, and then when one goes online and sees rather depressing figures for how much people do earn on average when you go to surveys like the ones that are carried out in the States. There was one the other day, for example, which suggested that the average return from wedding photography in the States was $1,750. But all that's academic anyway. The point is, if you want to earn a certain amount of money, how much do you need to charge people? That doesn't mean to say how much your ambitions are, but what your budget amount needs to be to make sense. So that's where we're starting off, and the I'll get back to that in a second. The calculator works in 3 steps, and it's really important to do this. The first thing is to work out the cost of being in business, and Gino has got some typical stats that he's gathered from some of his American clients. We're concentrating on the Americans this time, about the cost of being in business, not the cost of doing a job. That's step 2. In other words, that would mean the cost of albums, for example, the cost of printing, and of course the time that's involved in doing the job as well. And then once we've got that information, then we can go through and have a look at the amount that you need to charge to cope with those realities, if you like. And then we can start to play what if. And that was the list of questions that we used, that we put out in the promotion for this webinar. I just wanted to go back to that slide that I skipped over, if I can find it, to say that we're not offering you any business advice here. We're making some suggestions and giving you a tool, but we don't know anything about anybody's business here. So if you follow our suggestions, that's cool, but you really need to consult a professional if you want outside help. So let's go to the webinar, and I'll go to the step 1, the cost of being in business. And Gino, can you go through and tell us the information that you've got here? You'll see that step 1 is what you want to earn, as I said earlier on. And if we take as our category weddings, you'll see we've got more space over here, but we'll leave that blank for now. So how, let's assume that from weddings you want to earn 100% of your income. That's all you're going to do. And can you tell us give us a figure to put in for the number of jobs you expect to shoot over the next 12 months.
Where did the information come from?
Gino?
Where did the information come from?
This information's come from discussions with clients recently, and probably over the last year or so.
All in
just
the
talking
USA?
talking to US clients. That doesn't really include Canadians, but mainly US clients.
Okay. So how many jobs shall we enter in there?
So starting off, the guys are aiming for 30 jobs, and that seems to be a typical figure.
Okay.
30 weddings a year.
And now let's be clear about this. What's the market value of doing that job? Not what you aim to get from it, but what would you expect to earn on average? What would they expect to earn on average?
Well, their expectations are around the $4,000 mark. I probably personally think it's probably more around the $3,500 in my many discussions, but let's put 4,000.
Okay, so what we're saying there is that what a professional photographer should be able to earn from shooting a wedding is $4,000, and we want to do 30 of those, and we want to earn all of our income at the moment from those weddings. Okay, so let's fill in a figure for the personal taxable income that the photographer wants to get from this. Give us a figure and then tell us where it comes from.
Yeah, well, I've got 80,000 here, so that's pre-tax.
Right, and how much shall I put in a full week?
And that comes from both people who are basically starting and have been in business for a while. It's sort of a medium figure there. And the people are looking to work 40 hours.
Okay. We've all heard of the 40-hour week. Okay, so now we've got we're going to shoot 30 weddings, and we want to earn $80,000 from them. Okay, so let's talk about our capital expenditure. Remember, what we're doing here is talking about the cost of being in business. So, how much to replace your camera gear and accessories, and how often are you going to do so? And that'll give us an annual amount that we need to pay.
Okay, I've got a figure of $12,000 here, replacement value, and that typically includes a couple of cameras and your lenses you'd probably leave alone, but the cycle would be around 3 years.
Okay, and computers, projector, software, all that kind of stuff?
I've got 7,000, and every 3 years as well.
Okay, and vehicle?
Now this one I've got the new car value of 25,000, and that would be on about a 6-year cycle.
Okay. Now these figures obviously mean nothing, as we've stressed, to your particular business. You need to work out what these figures are. A lot of people will spend a lot more than this. Some people will spend less. We've got a couple of blank lines there. Have you got anything else that we could add? I don't know, furniture, goodness knows what.
Well, we've got some fixed assets there, and I've got a figure of $2,500, which is every 10 years. That can relate to, office supplies like desks, chairs, maybe some furniture in your display room or whatever.
Okay, so we're saying there that that capital expenditure is you've got $46,500 worth of gear there, and you're going to replace it over a particular period of time. But adding that up, that's 10,750 on these figures that you need to add to your 80,000. So the spreadsheet's going to remember that. What about promotional costs? How much you spend to generate the business that you're going to make? Everything from sample albums through to going to bridal fairs.
Promotional costs. Yeah, around about the $4,000 figure. That does include those sample albums, some promotional materials, and a couple of bridal fairs.
Are we getting anybody texting and saying this is nonsense? Honestly, these figures are way out. But let's continue anyway. Right. What about employees?
Me.
Good on you. Okay, employees.
Okay, well, employees, I've got nothing in there. Reason being, I find most of the guys are working by themselves or with their partners in their business. There's very few that I deal with that have lots of employees or have a lot of full-time staff working for them. So
Okay.
typically, I would say
Are you saying they're not valuing their partners?
I'd never say that, Stephen.
Boy, I think I might just keep quiet here. Okay, overheads. I hope these words, by the way, mean the same thing to people around the world. This is always a problem. Okay, let's just rattle through these quickly. Overheads, overhead wages. For example, do you have a receptionist, a bookkeeper, or whatever? Just tell me those figures, and I'll bang them in as quickly as we can.
So once again, the receptionist and bookkeeper, no. I've got no figures in there for that.
Okay, rent.
As most photographers tend to do that themselves.
Sure, rent.
Rent, same deal, nothing there. Guys are working from home.
Okay.
And they're not taking that into account.
Okay, so what's your first figure?
Property taxes, looking at about $1,000 per annum.
Okay, power.
Power, 2,400.
Okay, phone and internet.
Phone and internet, 2,200.
Okay, insurance.
Insurance, 800.
Okay, professional fees.
I think what am I looking at here? Insurance, sorry, 1,000.
Pardon? What happened there?
Got those figures back to front.
Oh, never mind.
Insurance is 1,000, and professional fees are about 800.
Never mind. Training.
So that's the accountant. Training about
I'm sorry, my mouse is giving me trouble. Okay, 1,000. Right. Subscriptions.
700.
Right. Motor vehicle.
2,500.
Repairs and maintenance.
1,200.
1,200. Okay, so the important thing here is to gather in all of these things here, and I'm using a magic mouse. If anybody's got one of these Apple Magic Mice, you'll know that's a real pain in the neck. So here we have got all of the costs of being in business. If you didn't do a single job, you would need to cover these expenses, or you can call it a hobby if you like. But that means that in order to cover those costs, and we haven't actually done the job yet, it's $3,585 US. And remember that we set up here that the market value that we're aiming for was 4,000. Remembering also that probably the amount that people in the States spend on average is less than 2. So yeah, so we've got the cost of doing a business. Now let's go and look at the job costs. And in here, I'm just going to copy and paste.
To be clear though, that job cost includes that salary you've included though, doesn't it?
Yeah, that's right. It includes the salary. And I think that's a point to make about our mindset about this, Stephen, and that is that when we finish looking at these figures, you'll see that by far the biggest cost in there is you. And unfortunately also the most expendable cost is you. By you I mean the photographer. Because, you know, at the end of the day you get what's left over after paying these costs. Either that or you can't replace your camera or whatever, or you start to drive an older car. So I'm going to put some figures in here which are for Queensberry products, the presentation products. We're now talking about the actual cost of doing a job. Now these figures here are for different categories, and I won't run through them, but they start off with the actual business of getting the wedding, shooting the pictures, and then doing all the work involved in getting the finished product done. And in the old days, of course, these costs would look a little bit different. But these days, I mean, with digital, there's not a lot of actual expense up here, perhaps. But the big item which costs money is the album, assuming you're doing an album, and we can talk about that later on when we start to play the what if bit. But I've put in there the cost of a Queensberry leather page mount album, assembled, partially assembled, ready for you to put your prints in. And in fact, I'll put in here the cost of, not 189,000, I better put in a decimal point, of Queensberry doing the printing. Now, I understand, Gino, that our printing is a little bit more expensive than you could get locally. So do you want to put a figure in there for what you'd expect to pay for a typical album? Would you like to reduce that, or what?
Yeah, typical album we'd probably be around the 12 by 12 or 14 by 10. You're looking at about $120 for printing. That, of course, is print-ready printing.
Okay, so in other words, you've done all the work. So now we've got the cost of doing the job, right? Now that, well, maybe there's a few sundries and so on, but effectively, really the only cost involved in here, rock bottom, is the album. And of course, as we know with Shoot and Burn, you can get rid of that completely too. So you've got $657.50. And you need to add that to the $3,500 odd we got for the cost of doing in business, and then we've got a figure that we need to clear to cover all our costs, to cover the cost of doing the job, and to uh, and to make the money that we want to earn out of this. But we've got to remember one other thing. Now I'm going to put in some arbitrary figures. I'm just going to copy and paste them and then go back, because since we've gone digital, of course, the world has also changed in other ways, and that is that we need to do a lot more work. So what I've done there is to put in some random figures, more or less random figures, um, uh, which reflects the fact that for a lot of photographers, shooting a wedding is actually a full-time job, which unfortunately many brides are not prepared to pay for. But so I put up here in effect 8 hours for the sales process. In other words, allowing a day in marketing, gathering work, going to bridal fairs, goodness knows what, a day for shooting the images, and then the rest of this time is in the various stages of album design, color correction, creative enhancements in Photoshop and so on. But effectively, put your own figures in there. But for a lot of people, being honest, it's a full-time job. Does anybody want to comment on those? Or because what I'm trying to do here is emphasize the fact that it's not just money that we're spending here, it's time.
I think this is the difficult thing, in the sense that, you know what, this is an unusual business and not really one that's very sustainable the way you're describing it. I mean, there's certainly a lot of photographers who are in this situation, but not people who are starting off. You know, you've got no advertising, no way of getting people in the door and so forth, and you're showing no cost of actually getting the sales. So
not quite true, Stephen. We allowed, I think, 4,000 or something. Yeah, we did allow a little bit of cash, not a lot.
Well, but you understand what I mean. The chance of getting $80,000 a year out of the blocks is it's a rare person that does that, and probably the thing that they are trading on is either people that they know, or their reputation, or their personality. So I think the thing is that the way this is showing is it's showing things like the album as being a cost, but they are actually part of the kind of overall package of making the overall thing look like it's got value, and offsetting that sort of stuff. But the biggest thing is that where these figures to me are wrong is that most photographers don't spend an hour on color correction or Photoshop work.
Sorry.
They spend 20 hours and so forth, and therefore their hourly rate just drops to a ridiculous level. But that's the what if, isn't it? It's
well, exactly. If you go and look at this analysis page here, you can see that in order to forget about the realism or not, but in order to get that income, that $80,000 worth of income, you'd need to be charging $4,200 and a bit to achieve it, to cover all of those particular costs. If you could hit the $4,000, if I just scroll down here, if you could hit the $4,000, in other words, you only achieved that market value of $4,000 that Gino said at the beginning, your income would drop to 72, if you couldn't achieve that, then that's going to come out of your back pocket. It's not going to come out of the costs, because they're kind of set. Although of course you could change the album, for example. You could take the shoot and burn route.
So we've actually got this online now, don't we?
Yep. You mean the calculator? Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So we've got the spreadsheet online. Yeah. So people can go and they can put in their own figures and so on. And the important thing about where you've got to here is it's just a model, if you like. So the challenge is for people is to go in there and put in figures that they believe in. And the hardest thing with this is for people to be brutally honest with themselves about what their reality is. For example, I know when I filled out the spreadsheet, I would probably put in, $12,000 in cameras and, $7,000 for computer, and I would argue that I'd do it every 3 years, but that wouldn't be my reality. I would spend a lot more on the computers and so forth. So this only works if people are prepared to be honest with themselves about what they actually really want to do and so forth. And then with the cold hard facts about what it is going to cost, they then have to say, well, gosh, I actually have to charge $5,000 if I want to have this hourly rate and be able to run my studio this way, or I have to work out where I'm going to trim my costs. And that's the what if part of it. They can change any of these figures and come back and just play and so forth. So this isn't telling you how to do Photoshop work or anything like that. It's just saying businesses at the end of the day are only healthy when they're making money, and when you're able to have a balance between things, and this is just showing things what they are.
Yeah. So my
Stephen,
point.
I think
Sorry,
a good
go on,
exercise to do is. Sorry, I was just going to say a good exercise to do is actually when you've shot a wedding and you're doing this Photoshop work and you're doing all this retouching, is actually to keep a timesheet, because one of the things is what people actually think they're putting into a wedding time-wise opposed to what they're actually doing may differ. And I think people will be surprised once they actually notate down everything they actually put into it and what they come out with at the end of the process.
I think that
the
point about what I'm doing here at the moment is exactly what Stephen is saying, to say that this is a pretty unsustainable business model. Now, I hadn't heard Gino's figures before. It always makes you a little bit nervous to do this, but it's just confirming what always happens when I go through this process. Up here, you can see that you are, as I said, the biggest cost in this business here, but you are the point of the business. The photographer is the person who's doing this as a business, not a hobby, and they represent, in a real sense, 63% of the costs. The actual job costs in this particular case, and this varies, this is actually quite low, but the album and the printing and so on represents only 16% of the overall cost. So people are sitting there and saying, hey, well, I could save some money here and put it in my back pocket by not doing albums, but you're not really doing a huge amount of damage on the cost front, only about 16% if you got rid of them all entirely. But you are also maybe doing some damage on what the market value of the job is. In other words, if you're moving down market towards, I don't know, shoot and burn, giving stuff away, competing with the backyarders on price, all that kind of thing, you might be saving costs, and if you are doing sort of a part-time hobby or whatever, then you might be quite happy with this. But yeah, anyway, this is an unsustainable business model. The question is therefore what we do about it. One other point that I would make, Stephen, from what you said, is that there is quite a lot of free promotional activity available. For example, on Facebook, I noticed we've got one or two pretty switched on social media, social marketing people here. Yeah, so there's quite a lot of marketing you can do for free, but never mind.
Yeah, but can I? But just to clarify though, I think we've got to be very. I realised as soon as I said about the unsustainable business model, there will probably be in this audience, because there's a lot of people there, somebody saying, "Oh, that's my business model. I'm quite comfortable in it. It works really well for me. Thank you very much." But our experience of going to seminars around the world is the person up on the stage who is running a successful business and's got it all together for whatever the topic is that they're talking about does not necessarily represent everybody that's in the audience. Does that make sense? So they have their business model, the way things work for them. And that's based on a few things. How connected they are, how long they've been doing this, the history of weddings they've already shot, their pricing, their personality. It's a whole lot of things. So the point is not to say that this model is wrong. The point is to say this is just one, and people then need to come back and play with it. So the reality that I tend to see is that, for example, people might have all the costs similar to this, but they spend 40 hours a wedding on Photoshop work. Yeah. So the interesting thing about that is that then when you divide what they're actually earning by, 80 hours for each wedding, they're earning minimum wage. It's not a reality. So their challenge is to say, how do I get labor costs out of my business or time out of my business? Another photographer goes, oh, well, I went to a seminar and really I should just be, I'm the most valuable asset here and I should be focusing on my personality. That works really well if you can sell like that. But the real fact is that most people tend, when they're asking the customer to spend $5,000, feel nervous about the fact that this is a crap load of money and they're just going to give them a CD or a plastic bag full of photographs. I'm being dramatic for an effect, but it's kind of that end of the spectrum. So they get all nervous and they can't pull off a sale like that. Their reality is different. How can I put together a package which I feel that the customer is going to think is good value, and I'm going to feel comfortable selling, and therefore I can up my revenue? You understand what I'm saying? So people again have to come back and say, where am I really at in this equation, and start playing with it. So I'm not saying it's not sustainable. I'm just saying it's not sustainable as a let's all photographers do business this way and with these costs and so forth, because everybody's personality is different.
Well, the thing about this is, I think, if we go back to the job cost thing here, is the fact that Gino's got some figures to fill in over here, right? He's saying, well, we don't have to just make all our money out of these weddings. That makes a big difference. We could do this, but the problem is that you've already got a full-time job. So I think if we started to play what if, we could go back to the beginning here and just quickly whack in some more figures over here. So Gino, can you do that? You had portraits, right? And what?
Engagement shoots.
Engagement shoots. Okay. Well, whoops. How do you spell engagements? Okay, so so we only want 100% about thing here, so we need to split up our effort, if you like, between these, our revenue. So what have we got for weddings, portraits, engagements there as a percentage of our income?
Well, I've got 5% portraits, 10% engagement, and 85% weddings.
So you said 5% there? Okay, so that's not really being terribly ambitious, but how many of these jobs are we going to do?
I had actually 10 portraits, and my figure's wrong here. I've got it's a bit high. About 20 engagement shoots.
Never mind. Let's just put the figures.
So we're trying to sell an engagement shoot to most of our.
Okay, and what revenue are we taking from these?
800 for portraits and 700 for an engagement shoot.
It's interesting because the figures that Joe came up in the UK were completely different. I think she was aiming for at least one portrait shoot a week. The point is that you don't have to just depend upon weddings. That now when we go down here, instead of wanting to make, even on these very modest expectations, you only need to make 68,000 from your weddings. And if you come down actually and look at the amount, you're now underneath that magic 4,000 level. And you're still getting your $80,000 overall, but on the expectation that you're going to make some money on these other revenue streams. The point is, how are you going to do that when you've got a full-time job anyway, because of all of the time that you're spending here? And let me just put in some more what-if figures. I'm just going to copy and paste some more. And assume that we're going to do quite a lot of this work for you. So in other words, Queensberry or whomever is going to do, and this is becoming quite common, designing the products, doing your color work and so on, putting all the albums together and so on. So there's no more work involved down here for you. All you're doing is shooting the pictures, marketing, shooting the pictures, and effectively selling them. We could even design them. Now, of course, there's a cost involved in that, but you see that what's happened down here is that you're only spending half a week on this, and that is a huge transformation. Interestingly enough, it's also the way that the business used to be in the good old days, when basically the lab did all the work. But of course, we have a little bit more to put into here, so let's see what the cost of that is. I actually looked up in our calculator the cost of us designing the album and doing your color correction. And assembling the album costs a little bit more. Copy, paste, and I think our printing was $189. So the point is that you've now increased the cost of that album, but you've got half a week in which to focus on this extra revenue stream. And looking at what you said earlier on about the amount that you're making there, I'd be making more of this because I reckon that's where the money is. Any comment on that, Stephen?
Yeah, I mean, I think the thing is that what's the level of the product and what's the quality of life and all those sorts of things. I mean, when I'm at a trade show, I always say to people, I normally always say the same thing, which is that as far as I'm concerned, Queensberry's to earn its place in the relationship with the photographer, it has to do a couple of things. It needs to help the people book more weddings by, helping them up their presentation. Because at the end of the day, what we're selling to photographers is packaging for photographs. It's kind of like a chocolate box. You take great chocolates and you put it in a beautiful box, and it's worth, multiples of what it was originally costed at, because you're taking people's perception of what they're getting from something they think they know to something they've never seen before. So that's one value, help people book more weddings. So I think a value in terms of the spreadsheet is changing that number from maybe 15 for some people to 30, or 30 to 40, or 40 to 50.
Changing which
The
number?
second one is that hopefully, well, you said how many weddings somebody's targeting.
Right.
And I saw a question from somebody before where they said, they're starting a new studio. What if people don't book them? Our role in this is to help the photographer get more weddings by adding more perceived value to the package, if you like. The second thing which we do is we say, look, you can choose our services from, on one end of the spectrum, complete creative control. You do everything. You assemble it. You do color correction and so forth. Or on the other end of the spectrum, personal freedom. You might have a little less control of the final outcome, but we give you your life back. You get to go out and surf and do have fun with the kids and so forth, rather than sitting in front of a computer. And so we save people time. And the last thing that I say to them, look, if we're not doing either of those things, make sure you enjoy the process. Make sure we're good people, make sure you feel good about what you're offering your clients and so forth. And those first two things are represented in the spreadsheet here. So if you just put them in the spreadsheet and you say Queensberry is just more cost, and the person doesn't value their own time, I don't believe that we've actually earned our place in that relationship. By that I mean that value is not a cost. It's an investment in adding perceived value to the initial offering to the bride and groom. Second of all, it's a thing that gets shown around to all the friends who are about to get married and the family, and together we build a reputation for your photography. It's something to go out and share your story in the wider community. Photos on computers, CDs don't do that. Or we save time, and photographers need to understand that wedding photography is really unpleasant when you're working 6 to 8 hours a week in front of Photoshop. And I'm not anti-Photoshop, I'm just anti the lifestyle people get into. So what we're saying is, spend a bit more money, have a quality of life, and free yourself up to earn more money from other things.
Well, to be fair, Stephen, obviously I agree with that. But on the other hand, this calculator is designed to be neutral about that. It's not suggesting that you have to go the Queensberry way. I mean, you could use the calculator in exactly the same way. So, for example, if we go back to this and said, go on.
But we're not neutral.
We're not neutral. I understand.
The thing is, it is a tool, and this is the photographer has to say, is that when they're putting in these costs, they have to say, does this add value or does it not? So what I'm saying here is that the spreadsheet is neutral. You could use this to do any business, whether or not you use albums or any album supplier. The bottom line is still going to be the same. But when you put in costs like the ones you presented for Queensberry, we're not asking you to put them in from a neutral perspective. We're asking you to choose us doing the color correction work so that you get your life back, not just so you can spend more money. Does it make sense? And the photographer they can't be neutral when they're putting these things in, because if the temptation was to go, gosh, if I just got rid of albums, I would save all this time and I would save all this money.
Well, let's do that.
And if I don't get to the next step, okay, but if I get to the next step, I know what the maths will look like. The maths will look very tempting.
No, I don't think that's true.
But the reality was...
I want to argue with that, if you don't mind. Let me just get rid of these costs here, okay? Let me get rid of them, because I don't think it does look that tempting. But we can get rid of $1,000. All we're going to do is do some shoot and burn here. So I come across here, and we're doing really well. We only need to charge $3,000 for our weddings, whereas before it was just a little bit over it on these figures. The question then becomes, how much can you get for shoot and burn coverage? Because at this point in time, I believe, and I'm sure that I know that probably the majority of people don't agree with me or with us, but you are now in that situation where it's equivalent to the old days, where what you got was a stack of prints, and we've seen some amazing stack of print weddings from the good old days. But you're sitting there now and you're saying, well, 3,067, that's commodity work. The question is, how much is it going to cost for that? You're not standing out in the marketplace. So I believe that figure there is probably not sustainable, and that means that this business model is not sustainable.
No, and Ian, just to add to that, brides and grooms are going to look at you now strictly on a time basis. So they're going to go, well, this guy's asking me $3,000 for 6 hours of his time. Is that really good value? Maybe I should look around for someone else who can do it a little bit cheaper.
Yeah,
Um,
exactly. Yeah.
those figures, I don't think, are sustainable.
But there is a group of speakers at the moment that are sitting there going, everything has been commoditized, from the presentation products and so forth, and therefore the asset you need to be promoting is yourself, and you need to be charging people on the basis of um, uh, me turning up. You're paying for me to turn up, and some people can pull it off. I mean, they're amazing. They've got history, all that sort of stuff, but not the person starting out. The average person starting out cannot do it. So what happens is that people get into a middle ground where they get confused about this. They say, oh no, what I'm going to do is I'm going to move to a la carte, right? And they therefore say it costs you $1,800 for me to go out the door, and in their head they convince themselves that they're going to sell an album afterwards, and they're going to get the other $2,000, after the event. But I kind of look at this in the same way as, why supermarkets like hungry people to come in the door rather than people who've just had a meal. When people walk through a supermarket, what's a supermarket called in the States? I'm not sure. A grocery store or whatever. When somebody comes into a grocery store hungry, they fill up their trolley a lot faster because they're wanting to, their mind tells them they need more food. Does that make sense? A wedding's the same thing. If somebody comes in and you don't sell them most of what you want in advance, it's pretty hard to convince them to do it afterwards, when the Visa card's full and the excitement of the day's over and so forth. So what happens is that $3,000 they thought they're going to get turns into $1,800 and a promise. And do you understand what I'm saying? They think they're going to get the 3,000 a different way, and then it becomes hard to sell. So
can we just interrupt here and ask
yes,
Nigel and so on if there are any particular questions there? There is one question I saw, which is sort of one of the slightly depressing ones, where somebody's saying, unfortunately, the brides I'm dealing with are only wanting to spend $400 to $500. How do you provide a service for them and still make a profit? Does anybody want to answer that in a positive way? Because I think that sounds like a great way to earn some money on a Saturday. I cannot see any way around that. To me, when you look at the costs of doing business there and making money, you've got a hobby there which you can turn a few bucks on, but you don't have a professional career. Somehow you have to break out of that.
I'll have a go at answering it. I get asked that at trade shows quite a bit. The honest thing is, and I'm not looking at the person asking the question, so I don't want this to be taken the wrong way. I think, to be honest, you can't make money. Fill in the spread. Go and into the online forum and fill out this spreadsheet and put in your real costs. There are costs of cameras and so forth. And what you realize is you cannot make money at $500 a Saturday if you have any of these costs in it. If you're going to replace your camera, probably at all, it's almost impossible. So the people who are making a lot of money out of their Saturday for $500 is they actually have a real job. Sorry, I don't mean a real job. They have a full-time job, and they are doing this to supplement their income. That's a really attractive situation. You're adding another $1,000 to $2,000 into your cash flow. It's supplementing what you're already earning. But you cannot be a professional photographer on just $500 a wedding, especially unless you're doing multiples of them, and that's hard work in a different way.
I think that you've also got, there is no easy way of getting out of that situation though, Stephen.
But can I finish the other part of it? Or what you need to do is you need to decide that you're defining your bride, my brides, in the wrong way. You need to be looking for the market of brides who will pay for them. Facebook and so forth mean your geography is not your town, it is maybe your country, and for some photographers anywhere in the world. And go and find out what they want and find a way of talking to them directly. You might need to do it by taking a strategy over a year or two to increase your pricing, 600, 700, 800, whatever it is, and have a strategy for getting there. and I'm, you know, I'm happy to spend some time talking to the person about that if they like. But the trap that most people get into here is they go, I have to sell something for $500, therefore I can't invest any time in it, and I can't offer anything. Now the trap in it is, if you don't offer people an opportunity to spend more money, they can't. If you say only measure me on the basis of the time I give you, that's the only basis on which they can give it to you. So what you really need to do is to work out a way of changing the equation for them. Invest a little bit of time afterwards. Like we were joking the other day, imagine if you had a shoot and burn package and you somehow bundled in there you did a design on every shoot and burn package and sent it to them on the anniversary of the wedding and said, buy your wedding album now, or maybe it's a finance thing, and just people are certainly spending a lot more than $500. I just think it's a matter of you got to find them and give them the opportunity to spend the money.
Another issue with that, Stephen, too, is if you continually sign $500 jobs, all the referrals coming back into your business, you're going to be constantly answering the same questions. Be constantly saying, look, I don't want to just burn images. You're going to get stuck into a rut. The guys that I deal with that sell 30 albums a year rarely get asked for shoot and burn. The reason is all the referrals are qualified. They're coming in with an expectation that they're going to get albums, they're going to get a complete package, and they're going to walk out happy at the end of the day.
Yeah. $500 weddings refer $500 weddings. $5,000 weddings refer $5,000 weddings. It's not, I'm oversimplifying, but it's kind of true. And the second thing is you have to be clear about who you are as a photographer and be prepared to say no to booking out to your Saturday. And I hate to say it, for some people even that means going and getting a part-time job to supplement the income while they establish their business, rather than just committing to filling up Saturdays for people that don't want to pay for your time.
I agree with that. There was another question came in from somebody saying 30 weddings is a bit of a pipe dream around the San Francisco area. I think the questioner came from saying 15 to 20 is more like it, and if you plugged those figures into the spreadsheet you'd get dramatically lower results. But the interesting thing is that you wouldn't have a full-time job, and I think, in all honesty, and I know this is a little bit heretical, that's a valid thing to do. I can remember a New Zealand photographer who's a good client of ours.
So what is a valid? I misunderstood what you're saying.
You use the expression a real job. I'm a photographer. I want to build a long-term career, making $80,000 or whatever figure that I set. But how do you do that from a standing start? And I think that it's a valid thing to do, to say, hey, I can't make a living out of shooting $5,000 weddings immediately because I've got to build the business. I'm going to get a job. And the fact of the matter is that in the early days of Queensberry, that's exactly what Heather and I did too. Because if you compromise your business model, you're never going to get there. As you both said, $500 weddings refer $500 weddings. And I was going to mention a New Zealand photographer who always comes to mind in this case, who was actually in marketing and was shooting only a few, but very profitable weddings, high-end weddings, came from a wine-growing region, it's a good area, but she had a full-time job. And now she's got a very good photography business. You need to work out how you're going to get from A to B, I think, and certainly heading in the opposite direction is not going to get you there.
I think the interesting thing about this is I was looking at the attendee list just before, and there's some really impressive photographers in the audience, and I kind of almost I feel nervous even saying some of the stuff in front of them because they have very good and very sound business models and so forth. So forgive me if I say this wrong, but the real effect is I think that what people do is they get caught up in the numbers side of it before they're clear about who they're wanting to be. I think at Queensberry we're pretty good at understanding what we want to do, how we want to do it, and whom we want to do it with. I'll say that again. What we want to do, how we want to do it, and whom we want to do it with. Now, constantly we get opportunities to sell lots and lots of albums really cheap, and all the time we get opportunities to sell lots of albums with frilly stuff on it and so forth. But that's just not who we are. And Shoot and Burn to me fits in the same category for photographers. Is if your ambition is to sell our weddings for 5,000, 10,000, 20,000 or more, then you're actually going to damage your reputation by doing $500 weddings for two reasons. One is you're not available on that Saturday to do the ones when they come up. B, you're keeping yourself busy and caught up in a job, paying the bills, rather than being clear about it. And second of all, people just, when they look at your samples, so the trick is to say, okay, how am I going to get there over a year or 2 years, or how do I have a job where I can be more choosy about the weddings that I do? Or it's a strategy. It's just you got to lay a path out in front of you, but don't fill your time up with stuff that doesn't support you. I don't know if that came out very clear, but not Gina, do you understand what I'm saying? Or
I do, and I can take a New Zealand perspective on this as well. A lot of New Zealand photographers aren't solely committed to just weddings. They take up commercial work, portrait work, a bunch of other stuff, and that can be enough to supplement those weddings while you get started. So it's about growing the business that way in other avenues. It doesn't necessarily mean another job.
There was an interesting question in here from somebody saying, look at Tiffany or Chanel. They have no issue with their market because they've chosen their market. I think unfortunately one of the things about that is to build a luxury brand takes quite a while. It's a big effort, and I think in a way that's one of the things. I don't want to plug the Queensberry thing too much here. I really do want to see people use this calculator to work out a business model. I'd like it to end up involving Queensberry, but I'd like them to use it in the first place. But one of the things about Queensberry is the fact that it's not about the cost. What you've got to get, you either agree with this or not, but what needs to be understood is that by piggybacking on packaging and high brand values and all of the other things you do to build an upmarket a brand of your own, it's not just you can't just look at the costs. You've got to look at what it does to the top line. You've got to look at what you can expect by way of revenue. And if you look just at the costs, you won't do anything. The fact of the matter is, people do. I've just been complaining about my magic mouse, but people do buy Apple despite the fact that they're more expensive. People don't buy most things in the modern world strictly on the basis of price. And not only that, but as soon as you take the assumption that they do, you can't win. Photographers can't win, and there was one reason only, and that is because of this figure up here, that the amount that you need to earn is the problem. Your other costs are comparatively low, especially in this day and age. So what you need to do is to focus on on the top line, and you need to focus on how you get the time involved in doing the job down to the point where you can build your business rather than sit behind a computer and do what somebody I know, a business mentor I know, calls stupid work. I shouldn't have said that, but you get my point.
Can I make a quick suggestion? I mean, I took the conversation off in a direction. Can we go back and finish off the portraits things, because there's no time in there, I notice, and just show what that model looks like after?
Sure. Well, have you got the jobs?
No,
have you got
no time in there.
Yeah, I've actually deleted all of that stuff now. But let's go through and put in the portrait stuff. Gino, have you got it?
Oh, sorry.
Yep, I've got some figures there. It's mainly time. So the first thing, there usually is in a consultation, it's straight to shoot the images of 1.5 hours. That's probably a little light, but 1.5 hours is what I've got here. Preparing the images, 1.5 hours. Presenting the images for the sale, 2 hours. Designing products, 2 hours. Photoshop work, 2 hours. And I guess corrective retouching and enhancements, 2 hours for the portrait. Placing orders, 1 hour. And presentation afterwards, 1 hour. And there are some costs associated as well. I've got for products and frames, $75 and $50 for printing.
Right. So the thing about this though is, whatever you argue about this, there's only a few jobs in there too, of course, but you've got the time to do this. Now, I've made that time by getting rid of all of the album costs. We've made this basically a shoot and burn deal. In fact, you can get rid of more with a shoot and burn. But you get the point that by getting rid of the stuff that's in this column here, the time column, you've got the opportunity to do stuff over here, and I think that's very important. But I think we've made that point. We probably laboured that point too much. I want to suggest two things to wrap up the hour. Number one, Nigel, have you got any questions that you wanted to put from what's been going through?
There's a few questions, but there's a few questions. But do you want to finish up and then we'll look at some of these?
Okay. Well, you got a particular set of figures which were quite interesting from one of our clients in the US. Gino, could we put those in place of this? Because this gives you a completely different look, doesn't it? We'll have to do it pretty quickly, though.
Sure, just give me a second here. I'll bring those up. Okay, so where are we? Okay, 52 weddings a year.
Okay, we'll put in 4,000 as the total.
And
how much?
And we've got to remember these are actual figures now. So.
Okay.
150,000.
150,000 is what he wants.
We've got the same figure there. He spends a little bit more on his expenses. He's 15,000 on his camera gear.
Yeah.
The rest is pretty much the same.
I just saw that's changed a bit.
Going down to overheads, they're pretty much the same.
Hang on a minute. Let me just put this in, and then we will be sure that it's right. So. Yeah, that's pretty close.
Yep.
And promotion, he's spending a bit more. Let's forget about the other figures here, but just put this in. Okay, so we're down to overheads.
Promotion, he spends 4,500.
Yep, got that.
Yep, overheads. So he works from home as well. The first one is power. Is property taxes and rates, 1,000. Power, 2,400.
Have I done the right thing there? How much does that add up to completely? I've got 12.9. Is
12.9 for his
cool.
overhead.
So I've just copied and pasted them
yes,
so that we can
correct.
get through it.
Yep.
Okay, so now we go to job costs. Yep. Okay, so now that's his cost of being a business, and his income expectations are quite a lot higher than we've been talking about, and now we're going to talk about his about the actual job costs. So can you go through those? Let me just get rid of this.
So sales expenses, he does have a commission plan at $38, and he spends about 3.5 hours getting the sale. Shoot the images, he spends 12 hours and about $300 on an assistant.
Well, hang on a minute. Let's just slow down. $300.
Preparing the images.
Okay, 12 hours.
And 12 hours shooting.
Right, okay, the image resource.
Big days.
Yeah.
2.5 hours.
Right.
To project the images for the sale. It costs him $100. He does print proofs, and he spends about 5.5 hours making the sale.
Designing the product.
Designing the product, he gets us to design it, so he pays us $200 roughly. He spends about 2 hours getting everything ready. Photoshop, he gets us to do that as well, about $225.
Right.
He does still spend 6 hours around this area, just working through things.
Right.
Retouching and enhancements, $300.
And an hour and a half on that too.
And he spends an hour and a half. Yep, so he's saving big time there. Placing orders with suppliers, 2.5 hours. For all his products together, so this includes frames, he also has nice presentation bags, and he has a lot of other stuff that he adds on, is about $1,175.
So that includes the album and the printing as well.
Album, printing, frames, the whole shebang. Final printing, $50, and that's basically only for portrait stuff. The other printing costs associated with the album are in the presentation products.
Okay.
And he spends about $25 on bits and pieces.
Okay, so he's got a full-time job doing that. So let's just forget about this other stuff. But let's have a look and see how his business model works out. So I know that we've got a little bit of time somewhere there with this gentleman who obviously works very hard.
Do you need to, before you do that, do you need to go up and remove the change of percentages?
Okay. Okay, so make it 100
about portraits and engagements up there.
Okay.
Yep.
Let's see how that's gone. So we've got...
and your income is...
My income...
You're missing a zero
You're
on
still,
your
I've done
taxable
something wrong
income
there. What have I done? Oh, yeah. Thanks,
You've got
Nigel.
15,000 instead of
Yeah.
150.
Is everybody confused by that? Okay, so now that looks a little bit different. So his cost of being in business, including his income, means he needs to charge 3,482, and he's spending a lot of money on the job costs, right? So we go into here, and he would need to make to sell for about $5,900 to get his income and to cover those costs. So can you tell me how he's doing?
He's doing very well. Yeah, he's achieving those figures. His base packages start at about 4,500. He does very well with that, and he adds on at least $1,000 for every job. So he's achieving his figures, and he's getting good quality referrals. He rarely tells me about shoot and burn requests. In fact, he just basically turns them away, or he tries to talk them into a bigger package. But he wouldn't book one. He would walk away from that.
Okay, so he is also doing, now we don't have time to put these figures in here, but he's also doing a little bit of portrait and engagement work and so on. In fact, as I understand the guy...
Well, he's actually doing a lot of engagement work as well.
Right.
He's doing 30 of those a year, and that's one of his upsells. He tries to sell every wedding package an engagement portrait.
To me, the thing to plug the Queensberry line here for a minute, that makes this possible is the fact that although he is spending a bit of time here, but he could use up all of his time by doing a whole lot of the stuff that he's actually paying Queensberry to do. So it's that's a relationship that works for him. But I think we should probably leave that there. It's just another way of looking at things. That the point about this is to say, what if I could, the calculator, what if I was to follow this line? How could I make this thing work? Because it's one thing to have a good idea. It's actually another thing to make sure that it works. One activity is right brain, another one is left. But Nigel, before we end up, have we got any questions there that we should look at?
Can I, before I forget, can I just add one thing into this? I feel very strongly about this from a Queensberry perspective. I said we're very clear about who we are, so what we do, how we do it, and who we want to do it with. And part of that is that we are absolutely passionate about photographers being successful in business. And probably we don't even mind on one level whether that is, well, we obviously at the end of the day do want it to be Queensberry, but we just want photographers to be successful. So what we've been trying to do with these webinars and the blog posts and the Facebook pages and so forth is to build a community where photographers can come together with that same principle in mind, that they want to help build up a successful photographic community. And therefore, I think one of the differences about the Queensberry account managers is that they're meant to take a kind of more of a kind of consulting role in supporting photographers doing that. But I think everybody who is on, in this webinar, who's involved in Queensberry at all, would be more than happy to have these conversations if photographers are trying to set a strategy, including myself. So, we do have, one of the beauties about our business is that we're doing business around the world. There are some themes in what makes a successful studio, we believe, and we really want to make sure people understand that if people want to know more about it, come and engage in the blog and on the Facebook pages, or phone us, or talk to us in whatever mode you want to, really. So, is that fair, Gino? And
yes, absolutely.
Cool.
Sorry. Yeah. Anything else before we go, Nigel? I did see one person. Sorry, go on.
I thought there was two questions.
Yep. Go on.
The main thing, Ian, people are wanting to know, just since we've ticked over 9 o'clock, is where or how can they get their hands on the calculator? Do you want to cover that?
I'm sorry. Say that again.
A lot of people are just wanting to know where they can get hold of the calculator, or where they can use it or download it from.
Yes, just 1 minute. I don't think I've got Safari up. I'll also show you a number of other links that we have here. So on the Queensberry has two websites, if you like. One is a consumer site for those of you who are not familiar with it, and the other one is our partner site. And the partner site is the resources for photographers. Now, if you go to our knowledge base, I'm signed in here, and you'll need to be signed in to get access to this. But I'm sure that everybody is here will be. Go to the knowledge base, and then go to marketing and business. And there's a whole lot of resources here which are worth looking at, and they answer some of the other questions we've had here about marketing to the high end rather than to the low end. But here under this section you'll find the minimum average sale calculator, how much you need to charge, and you just click on that, and there you'll find the calculator online. There's a download link on this page and some instructions about how to use it. So that's one thing. I'll get that out of the way. And for those of you who are not familiar with our resources, if I can find the darn things, there's our.
Do we still have that article in there about good, better, best?
Yeah, we do indeed.
Do we still have that article in there about the pricing model good, better, best?
We have that, and we have the webinar online as well. I've just realized I've left something off this list here, but I just wanted to show these links. And we will send these out to you afterwards, including the link for the calculator. And we should also have on here our Vimeo pages, and the previous webinars are available there, as well as a whole lot of other stuff which is pretty useful. You need to understand that we've got two sets of pages, one for the consumers, because I think we're probably the only album company who do project an image to the consumer, in other words your customers, which is why we've done our website the way that we have, so that people can go online and find out about our product. But we have our consumer website, our consumer blog, and a consumer Facebook page. Same thing for the photographers, a partner site, a partner blog, a partner Facebook page, and as well as Photo Junction, of course. And then also for bragging rights, we have another page down here, which basically shows people saying nice things about us, which we like to look at occasionally ourselves. And also, of course, we're on Twitter. So, and a Vimeo page. We'll send you out those links afterwards with the show notes, and I hope you get a lot of value from it. And we're really, really interested in your success because we only succeed if you do. We can't get away from that fact. So, yeah, do take a look. And if you have any questions to ask, or if you need any help with the calculator, please get in touch with us. And the last thing that I would like to ask is if you could give us some feedback about this. Just get onto the question panel and tell us what you thought about this, how we could do it better. We're dead keen to do the best that we can and to provide you with all the support that we possibly can as well. I'll pass it back to Nigel. Thank you.
Cool, thanks, Ian. Well, we've just passed 9 o'clock. So if you do need to run off, there's a few people saying they've had to go. So thank you to everyone for coming along, and trust you've found it useful. We will be in touch soon with those links that Ian talked about, and the link to the web to the recording of the webinar and the calculator as well. So thanks a lot for coming along. Do let us know what you thought. Are you guys? There's a few questions that people have asked. Are you guys happy to sort of stick around and have a chat about some of these other questions? If people want to stick around, Ian, Gino, and Stephen.
Yeah, I'm happy.
Absolutely.
Sure, no problem.
Cool. All right. Well, again, thanks for coming along. If you do need to shoot off, and we can see some good feedback coming in too. So thanks for that. A couple of questions. There's one at the start, Ian, about using the calculator. I guess people have sort of asked about things that aren't included on the calculator, like annualized cost of transport and outsourcing post-production and disk storage and all that sort of stuff. How do you suggest people work that into the calculator, all those sorts of things into the calculator?
Well, I put a blog post up the other day about accountants. Accountants are great for keeping score. You need to go back to your own accounts, and I think you should take them seriously. But the point about this is to play what if with them. Now, I think the only way that we can answer that question is to say that there is some, let's go back to the cost of being in business. There's a space in there for overheads, for example, and I put a couple of blank spaces down at the bottom here. Now I've tried to put in a generic thing which covers as many costs as possible, but just bung them in there. It doesn't really matter. Just take a line and add all the other stuff. Just don't forget anything. Just don't pretend that those costs don't exist, because they do. And another thing that occurred to me when Gino was going through these expenses was that even if you're working from home, the tax department will allow you to claim your rent, etc. But just find a gap and put it into this. I don't really see that as a problem.
I think the most I think the most important thing is to say, is this like an annual cost, i.e. an overhead, or is it a job cost? So, for example, annualized cost of car would still fit in an overhead. It's your car cost for the year. You just have to be clear about how you calculated the figure. That's all. Job production costs. The category might not be exactly what the person. They might think about the category. So the description of the category different, but there are places that would fit. Just break it down to a job cost, an amount to allocate per job.
Well, not necessarily, Stephen. Just to be clear,
not,
I mean, you need to work out a difference. The fundamental difference here is between jobs which costs which you have even if you never do a single job. So if you've set yourself up in business and you paid you're paying rent for a studio or whatever, and you never do a job, that is still going to exist. All of those costs need to be on this single page here. The job costs need to be across here. Well, just wait a minute. Let me just.
But that's what I'm saying, though. I'm trying to.
Stephen, if you agree with me, I'm always happy.
Sorry.
Yeah, I think we do agree. But
No, I agree. I totally agree. All I'm saying is the person has to be clear. Is this an overhead, like a base cost of doing business, if you like?
Yeah.
Or is it a cost of doing this job? Now, it's not the real fine detail and pricing of this job is different from that job, but as an average job thing, most people know that they're going to have to, well, in the old days, develop some film, and if you've got an assistant who comes along for 5 hours times their hourly rate, that's a job cost.
Yeah,
unless
exactly.
they're a salaried employee who works for you every day, irrespective of whether they go out the door.
Okay, next one.
Sorry,
let's move
I
on.
agree.
Nigel, question asking. Yeah, just we've got a question about packages versus a la carte, and someone's just saying they can't seem to figure out which ways can increase sales the best. Do you guys have an opinion on that topic?
Well, I agree with Stephen. He was basically saying a la carte is cool, but a lot of people, it gives people the opportunity to not buy. You get the basic price and a promise, and that's as far as it goes. I think there's a lot to be said for that. The other thing that I think is when people come into your studio, I reckon you need to work on the assumption that they know damn all, and what they do know came from some sort of bridal site which is telling people they shouldn't be spending more than $1,000. They come into you, and you need to tell them what to buy. And a package, to me, is a great way to tell them what to buy and to encourage them to buy it. And so I definitely believe that a package is a good idea. I only think, we did cover this in our previous webinar, that it needs to be flexible. You need to be able to say to people who say, well, could I have this instead of that, or blah, 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 that you're able to give them what they want. But I'm in favour of packages, quite definitely.
I think the thing is, there's some really good arguments both ways, and I don't mean to be, I don't say this as being critical of anybody, but the relative fact is most people are not very comfortable when it comes to the selling part of the equation. So to me, the two things that the package does is allows the photographer to present to the bride and groom something that feels like it's worth what they're wanting to charge for it, $3,000, $4,000, $5,000, an overall thing, rather than just saying my time's worth $5,000. It doesn't. It's quite a hard thing to be able to get yourself into a situation where you're happy to do that. The second thing is it's about making a commitment up front when the person is enthusiastic and planning the wedding and they're allocating costs and so forth. So if you allow the bride and groom to say, I can delay that album cost with the photographer after the wedding so I can have my flowers now, the flowers are going to win. That makes sense? So I hate the idea of kind of looking at how can I rip as much money out of this person as I can. Well, actually, no, that comes out the wrong one. But what people need to do is they need to say how much, where am I aiming my cost and setting up so they can be successful in that, and understand that the competition is the flowers, it is the cake, it is the wedding dress, and so forth. It's not really other photographers. That's the first thing. The second thing is, like, I went to a meal the other day where they kind of had a banquet and so on. I was kind of interested in the fact that when you have a set menu, everybody happily says, I'll have this for my entree, this for my main, this for my dessert. Everybody does it. Everybody chooses the dessert then. But when you go into a normal restaurant, everybody says, okay, what do you want for your entree and your main? And then they come back later on and try to talk you into dessert. Nobody wants a dessert when they're full. So it's kind of interesting. I wonder what would happen to a restaurant if they took the dessert order at the beginning. Would they be more successful? It might not feel right, but I wonder if their dessert sales will go up. It's kind of interesting. And the package for me works the same way. You're asking for that commitment up front, and it's a higher hurdle to jump, but at the end of the day, I think it has better results.
Well, there's another question I've seen on Nigel's list there. Sorry, Gino.
Oh, sorry, Gino.
Far ahead.
Sorry, I was just going to quickly add to that. I talked to a lot of guys that are doing a la carte, and they're giving an album credit. Now that does cause a lot of problems as well. They have a lot of people that don't actually use that album credit, or they come back 2 years later and want to use that $800 or $500 to buy an album. And that job's 2 years ago, and it causes more problems than anything else. So as far as that sort of system's concerned, it doesn't seem to work that well. So I would be a package person myself.
Okay, can I respond to that, because basically I recommended that a couple of weeks ago, so I better defend myself. I think that there are two issues actually. That's one of them. The other one is somebody saying, does a package cap things? And that's what I mean about somebody suggesting that a la carte means that there's no limit to what people can spend, and there is a certain amount of truth with that. If you have the set menu, if you like, at a restaurant, it does tend to be cheaper. But that's what I mean about flexibility. I think that flexibility means that you need to be able to sell more pages. You need to be able to present your package in such a way that you can sell more pages, they can upgrade, and so on, in order to leave the door open after the wedding when people have got a completely different emotional feeling about the photography that they're looking at, to spend more money, because they will want to. By and large, people will want to. That's number one. Number two, and specifically relating to that album credit idea, maybe I've got this thing wrong, but my idea about the album credits is, say, here you have a credit of $1,000 or whatever it is towards an album when you choose to buy it. It's not a commitment to offer anything at a certain price. It's an amount of money to spend at a later date, and that may have some sort of incentive built into it as well. In other words, it might be worth more than if they pay after the date. But from my point of view, the point is to leave it as flexible so that people can choose a particular album, choose to upgrade to Musée, do whatever it is that they want to do after the wedding, but not to be a commitment about price or a particular album or whatever, because that does shut doors. So yeah, I'm not sure whether I'm misunderstanding what you're saying, Gino, or not, but I still feel like defending what I'm saying.
The reason I think in principle it's a great idea, but here's the thing that I've kind of got really passionate about in the last couple of years is the idea of energy and momentum. If you've got a low energy environment, it's very hard to build enthusiasm with that. If you've got low momentum, it's very hard to get action. So the thing about a package is the bride and groom go away on their wedding and they come back and they go, okay, well, now we want our photographs in our album. They turn up on your doorstep soon wanting those things because they know that's what they're afterwards. You get to do something with that excitement. Whereas if they go, okay, now I really want the album and I really want the photos and so forth, but I know that photographer's going to be asking for more money. Even if there's a credit to go towards it, the risk is that they then keep delaying the contact until they come and see you. Now they're probably, the cynic of me is probably saying some of them will be arguing. They will have a big credit card bill and so forth. They're not going to want to. It's like it's a killing the momentum thing. But a package to me is just a promise from you to what you provide, but it doesn't need to be all you offer after the event. And many photographers will plan extra pages or whatever it is. The only thing which I think is really important there is there's got to be full disclosure all the way through the process, where you say, look, my package is $2,500, but most people spend $4,500 by the time they finish. That's just fair. It gives the person a good indication of what it is. And the last thing is relative to those referrals. Is if I spend $4,500, I'm going to tell people I spent $4,500, making it more likely the next person that comes in the door will too. So I strongly believe in packages for most photographers. I just think it's so much easier to be successful.
And I think that
but we're running out of time. So, really it's maybe worthwhile to be a thing in itself, but a conversation in itself. But.
Yeah, I don't feel like disagreeing with what you're saying. I think that what's important in this in the way that you define the packages is that you're very clear about what's there, that you do leave the door open to be spending more. How you define things really, it doesn't matter that much. But I agree with agree with the business about the momentum, etc. What concerns me is the fact that in this day and age we have people basically making quite firm and specific commitments which they don't feel that they're able to break. So, for example, let's suppose that you've decided you're going to, I don't know, sell you promised to sell a 12 by 12 leather covered page mount album to a particular client. I believe, however you define it, you need to feel free to offer him, her, the couple, an 18 by 10 contemporary leather duo because it's just come on the market and it looks terrific, and you want your customers to have the best. Somehow, and also there is a question about pricing. Wedding commitments tend to be a long way ahead in time. You know, you could be making a commitment to a couple 2 years before they actually before they can actually design the album. So these things need to be considered in the way that you present yourself, and that's really, I guess, all I'm saying.
Can I make a suggestion? I think it's maybe it's a webinar in itself as the packages versus a la carte, and we can go and explore both directions of it. But that's why I was asking about that article earlier on about the good, better, best. I think the idea of having an offering which is good, what you go out the door with, better, which is what you mainly sell, and best, something for people to aspire to, and also to make better sound like good value. There's a whole argument. There's a whole strategy around pricing in that area, but it's 9:20 now, and we're
they are on this page here, by the way. Those articles are on this page.
I think there's one other question. There's one other question, I think. Nigel?
Was there one you saw, Ian, which you wanted to specifically talk about?
No, I'm pretty much done, I think. There are questions there which I don't see how we can address in this sort of context about competing. In fact, I think we have to a certain extent about how you compete in the recession. Business is tough. People don't want to spend that amount of money. How are you going to effectively shake the money tree to get them to invest more? And I don't see that at this point we can address that, but it's obviously a very important question. I think we're pretty much done there, I would say.
Is it possible that we come back and have a webinar about that specifically, or about
Sure.
I do definitely think that I've got to be careful not to make it too general a thing, but we have these conversations all the time with people, and I'm always happy if people want to give me a call about it, or certainly Sonia is our account, who looks after the account managers, the account managers themselves. There's a whole number of people who are involved in it. Or go on and start a conversation in the forums, or there's lots of ways of having that answer. But I think we should come back as a webinar.
Absolutely.
About it, so.
Absolutely. Okay. Anything else, or shall we sign off now? I see there's still a reasonable number of people here, actually. In fact, more than I think we probably ever had before, certainly 20 minutes after it's supposed to have finished. So I think we should say a big thank you to everybody for being so patient, and realizing that we like an honest debate here too. We don't necessarily agree But to a large extent, it's a question of you looking at these figures, you looking at the way that you feel comfortable doing business, and then getting a plan that makes business and testing it with the numbers to see if it makes sense. Because a good idea doesn't necessarily make sense. You need to work the numbers to see how it's likely to turn out, and that has been what we're trying to do here.
Yeah, thank you. I'm always humbled by the support we get from people, and thank you for everybody taking time out to come and see us, hear us.
Thanks for getting the numbers,
anyway, thank
Gino.
You.
No problem. Thank you.
Thank you.
And we'll
later,
talk
everybody.
again soon. Thank you, Nigel.